Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the true scary stories. Story 1. Watchful Eyes. I always thought my cat, Luna, had a staring problem. Her wide, unblinking eyes seemed fixated on my face, following my every move. At first, I found it endearing, a sign of her affection. But over time, it became unsettling. No matter where I was in the house, Luna's eyes were always on me, her pupils dilated and her expression intense. One evening, as I sat on the couch reading, I felt her gaze burn into my skin. "Luna, what is it?" I asked, half expecting her to respond. She simply stared, her eyes reflecting the dim light of the room. A shiver ran down my spine, and I tried to shake off the unease. It was just a cat, after all. Days turned into weeks, and Luna's behavior grew more peculiar. She started avoiding certain parts of the house, particularly the hallway leading to my bedroom. Whenever I tried to carry her through it, she would wriggle free, her fur bristling. The staring continued, more intense and focused than ever. It felt as if she was trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. Late one night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the sound grew clearer. It was a voice, barely audible, calling my name. "James," it whispered, sending chills down my spine. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked around. Luna was perched on the windowsill, her eyes wide and alert, staring intently at the corner of the room. I followed her gaze, my breath catching in my throat. The shadows seemed darker, more menacing. I could feel a presence, something cold and unseen. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, only the oppressive silence of the night. I turned on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with light. The corner was empty, but the feeling of being watched persisted. The next morning, I decided to investigate. I scoured the house, looking for anything out of the ordinary. In the attic, buried beneath old boxes and forgotten memories, I found a dusty photo album. Flipping through the pages, I discovered pictures of the previous owners, a family of 4. One photo, in particular, caught my eye. It was a picture of a young girl holding a black cat, eerily similar to Luna. Her eyes were wide, almost fearful, as she stared at something just out of frame. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a connection, something tying Luna to the past. That night, as I sat in my living room, I decided to do some research. Hours passed as I delved into the history of the house. What I found was chilling. The family had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, their bodies never found. Some said the house was haunted, cursed by their restless spirits. Luna's behavior grew more erratic. She hissed at empty spaces, her fur standing on end. I started hearing whispers more frequently, sometimes even feeling a cold breath on my neck. The sense of dread was overwhelming, making it hard to sleep, to think. I knew I had to do something, to find a way to uncover the truth. One night, as the whispers grew louder and the air turned icy, I decided to confront whatever was haunting me. Armed with a flashlight and my determination, I ventured into the dark corners of the house. Luna followed closely, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. As I approached the basement door, I felt a sudden gust of cold air, and the whispers turned into frantic cries. The basement was colder than the rest of the house, the air thick with an oppressive presence. As I descended the stairs, Luna's growls echoed around me. I felt something brush past me, and the light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw it, a figure, barely visible, standing in the corner. "Hey, subscribe for more scary stories." The figure stood motionless, shrouded in darkness. My heart pounded as I aimed the flashlight towards it, the beam slicing through the gloom. The light revealed a woman, her face pale and hollow, eyes sunken and filled with sorrow. She looked directly at me, and then at Luna. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. She lifted her hand, pointing to a spot on the wall. I followed her gesture, my hand trembling as I touched the cold, damp surface. The wall felt strange, almost brittle. I pressed harder, and a section gave way, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside the compartment was an old, leather-bound diary. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. I glanced back at the woman, but she had vanished, leaving behind only the lingering chill. Clutching the diary, I hurried upstairs, Luna trailing behind me. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands shaking as I opened the diary. It belonged to the young girl in the photo, Emily. Her entries were filled with the innocence of childhood, until they abruptly changed. The later entries spoke of shadows, whispers, and a malevolent presence that haunted the house. Emily wrote about her cat, Whiskers, who tried to protect her from the entity. But one night, both Emily and Whiskers disappeared, leaving the family devastated. As I read the final entry, a sense of dread washed over me. Emily described a figure much like the one I had seen, and her last words were a plea for help. She begged anyone who found the diary to release her and Whiskers from the curse that bound them to the house. Tears blurred my vision as I realized that Luna was Whiskers, reincarnated or trapped by the same entity. Determined to free them, I decided to perform a cleansing ritual. I researched various methods, choosing one that seemed the most powerful. That night, as the wind howled and the whispers intensified, I gathered the necessary items: candles, sage, and a silver bell. Luna watched me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. I started the ritual in the living room, lighting the candles and burning the sage. The air grew thicker, the shadows deeper. As I recited the incantation, I rang the bell, its clear sound cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. The whispers turned to screams, and the temperature dropped rapidly. I could feel the presence growing stronger, more desperate. Luna hissed and arched her back as a dark figure materialized in the room. It was the entity, the source of all the torment. It lunged at me, but the barrier created by the ritual held it back. I continued the incantation, my voice growing stronger despite the fear. The entity writhed and twisted, its form flickering like a dying flame. "Leave this place," I commanded, "and release those you have bound." The entity let out a guttural scream, its form beginning to dissipate. As it vanished, the temperature slowly returned to normal, and the oppressive presence lifted. I collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. Luna rubbed against me, her purrs a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. For the first time in weeks, she seemed at peace. I glanced around the room, feeling a sense of calm and safety that had been absent for so long. The nightmare was over, or so I thought. As I cleaned up the remnants of the ritual, I noticed a new entry in Emily's diary. It hadn't been there before. My hands shook as I read her final message: "Thank you, but it's not over. The entity will return. You must find the source." My heart sank. I had freed Emily and Whiskers, but the true source of the curse remained. I realized that my battle with the entity was far from over. The house held deeper secrets, and I was determined to uncover them. The revelation that the entity would return left me with a deep sense of unease. As the days passed, I noticed subtle changes in the house. The air felt heavy again, and shadows seemed to move on their own. Luna's peaceful demeanor was short-lived. She resumed her anxious staring, now fixated on the basement door. Determined to find the source of the curse, I delved deeper into the house's history. I discovered that the land had once belonged to a reclusive man named Victor Hale. He was rumored to have been a practitioner of dark arts, conducting sinister rituals in the basement. His disappearance coincided with the first reported hauntings. The more I read, the more I realized that Victor Hale's spirit might be the key to understanding the curse. I decided to explore the basement again, armed with the knowledge I had gathered. As I descended the stairs, Luna followed cautiously, her eyes darting around the dimly lit space. I reached the hidden compartment where I had found Emily's diary and began to search for any other hidden passages. My fingers brushed against a loose brick, and I pried it open to reveal a narrow tunnel. The tunnel was cramped and damp, the air thick with the smell of decay. I crawled through, Luna's soft footsteps echoing behind me. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, illuminated by a faint, otherworldly glow. In the center of the chamber was a stone altar, covered in strange symbols and dried blood. My heart raced as I examined the altar. It was clear that dark rituals had been performed here. I found an old, leather-bound book on the altar, its pages filled with sinister incantations and drawings. As I flipped through the book, I stumbled upon a page detailing a ritual to summon and bind spirits. Victor Hale had been trying to control the entity that haunted the house. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and the shadows deepened. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see the faint outline of Victor Hale. His eyes were hollow, and his expression was one of malice. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, his voice a chilling whisper. I backed away, clutching the book to my chest. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Hale's ghost advanced, his form becoming more solid. "This house is mine," he growled. "The spirits are mine to command." Luna hissed, her fur bristling as she stood protectively in front of me. I realized that Hale's spirit was bound to the house by the same dark rituals he had performed. The entity was a manifestation of his twisted desires and power. To break the curse, I needed to destroy the altar and sever Hale's connection to the spirits. Summoning all my courage, I began reciting the incantations from the book, reversing the rituals that bound the spirits. Hale's ghost screamed in fury, his form flickering and distorting. The chamber shook, and the air crackled with energy. I continued the incantations, my voice growing louder and more confident. With a final, desperate cry, Hale's ghost lunged at me. I smashed the book onto the altar, shattering the stone and breaking the symbols. There was a blinding flash of light, and Hale's ghost disintegrated into a cloud of dark mist. The chamber fell silent, and the oppressive presence lifted. Exhausted, I stumbled back through the tunnel and up the basement stairs, Luna close at my heels. The house felt different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I knew the curse was broken, but the experience had left me shaken. Luna seemed calmer, no longer staring at unseen threats. As I settled into bed that night, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in weeks. Luna curled up beside me, purring softly. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. The house held many secrets, and I had only scratched the surface. The nights following Victor Hale's banishment were strangely quiet. Luna seemed more relaxed, and I allowed myself to believe the nightmare was finally over. But the feeling of being watched never completely left me, gnawing at the back of my mind. Luna's occasional, wary glances toward the hallway hinted that something still lingered. One evening, I decided to invite my friend Sarah over. She was a local historian and had always been fascinated by the supernatural. I hoped her expertise might shed some light on any residual mysteries. As we sat in the living room, I recounted the events of the past weeks, from Luna's strange behavior to my encounter with Hale's ghost. "This house has a dark past, James," Sarah said, her brow furrowed. "Victor Hale's influence might be gone, but his rituals could have left lasting scars on the property. We need to make sure there's nothing else binding spirits here." Sarah suggested conducting a thorough investigation of the house, particularly focusing on the basement and any hidden areas. Armed with flashlights and recording equipment, we began our search. Luna, ever vigilant, followed us closely, her eyes darting around the dimly lit spaces. In the basement, Sarah noticed faint markings on the walls, previously obscured by grime. "These symbols," she murmured, tracing them with her fingers, "they're remnants of protective wards, meant to keep something contained." We followed the symbols, which led us to another hidden compartment. Inside, we found an old, iron-bound chest. With some effort, we pried it open, revealing a collection of strange artifacts, bones, dried herbs, and a small, ornate box. Sarah carefully lifted the box, her expression one of awe and fear. "This is a spirit trap," she explained. "Hale must have used it to bind the entity here. If we destroy it, we might release whatever is still haunting this place." My heart pounded as Sarah prepared a cleansing ritual. Luna watched intently, her ears twitching. As Sarah recited the incantations, a low, guttural growl echoed through the basement. The air grew cold, and shadows began to swirl around us. The presence was back, angrier than ever. Suddenly, the entity materialized, a monstrous form of dark smoke and shadow. It lunged at Sarah, but Luna leaped between them, her eyes glowing with a fierce light. The entity recoiled, as if struck by an invisible force. I realized that Luna's bond with Emily, and her own spirit, had given her a unique power to confront the entity. With renewed determination, I joined Sarah in the incantations, our voices merging into a powerful chant. The spirit trap glowed with a blinding light, and the entity shrieked, its form disintegrating into nothingness. The chest exploded in a burst of light, and the oppressive presence vanished completely. The basement was still, the air warm and clear. Luna rubbed against my leg, her purrs a comforting sound. Sarah and I exchanged relieved glances, knowing that the house was finally free of its dark past. As we climbed the stairs, I felt a sense of closure, a weight lifted from my shoulders. In the following weeks, the house seemed brighter, more welcoming. I no longer felt the eerie sensation of being watched, and Luna's behavior returned to normal. Sarah helped me cleanse the remaining symbols and artifacts, ensuring that no traces of Hale's influence remained. One night, as I sat on the porch with Luna, I reflected on everything that had happened. The bond between us had grown stronger, and I felt grateful for her protection and loyalty. Just as I was about to head inside, I noticed something in the corner of my eye, a faint, glowing figure of a young girl and her black cat. Emily and Whiskers, their spirits finally at peace. I smiled, knowing they were free. But as I turned to go inside, Luna paused, staring at the doorway. My heart skipped a beat. Following her gaze, I saw a shadow move swiftly out of sight. The feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. I realized that some doors, once opened, could never truly be closed. The house still held secrets, waiting to be uncovered. And as long as we lived there, Luna and I would face whatever came our way together. The night was dark and full of whispers, but we were ready. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Phantom Dog. I woke up to the sound of my dog barking, his deep, resonant barks echoing through the house. My heart pounded as I threw back the covers and hurried downstairs to let him out. The darkness of the hallway enveloped me, the cold wooden floor creaking under my bare feet. It was a sound I knew all too well, but tonight it seemed to carry an ominous tone, as if the house itself was groaning in distress. "Charlie, calm down," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. But as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. I remembered seeing Charlie, still asleep, next to my bed just moments ago. I had left him curled up in his usual spot, a soft snore escaping his muzzle. How could he be downstairs barking if he was upstairs sleeping? A chill ran down my spine. I flipped on the light switch, illuminating the living room in a harsh, fluorescent glow. My eyes darted around, looking for any sign of Charlie. The barking had stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. My pulse quickened as I scanned the room, my mind racing with possibilities. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. There was no response, just the eerie stillness of the house. I walked to the window and peered outside, half expecting to see Charlie waiting by the door. But the yard was empty, the night silent except for the rustling of leaves in the wind. I decided to check upstairs again, hoping to find Charlie still peacefully sleeping. As I ascended the stairs, each step felt heavier than the last, the air thick with an inexplicable dread. I reached my bedroom and pushed the door open slowly, my breath catching in my throat. There, on the bed, lay Charlie, exactly where I had left him, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Relief washed over me momentarily, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. If Charlie was here, then what had I heard? I stepped closer to the bed, gently touching his fur to reassure myself that he was real. His eyes flickered open, and he looked at me with a sleepy but trusting gaze. "Good boy," I whispered, scratching behind his ears. But my mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I turned to leave the room, but a soft creak behind me made me whip around. The closet door, slightly ajar, creaked again, as if moved by an unseen hand. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice firmer now. I approached the closet cautiously, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. I flung the door open, but it was empty, just a collection of clothes and boxes piled haphazardly. I let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish for being so jumpy. As I closed the closet door, I noticed something strange. A small, muddy footprint on the carpet, leading from the closet to the bed. My heart skipped a beat. Charlie's paws were clean, and there was no way he could have left that print. Panic surged through me as I backed away from the closet, my mind racing with thoughts of intruders or worse. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the flickering candle on my nightstand. I spun around, but there were no open windows, no apparent source for the draft. The temperature in the room plummeted, and I could see my breath misting in the air. I backed up against the wall, my eyes wide with terror as I heard the faint sound of whispering, indistinct and chilling, echoing around me. The whispering seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I strained to make out the words, but they remained elusive, a haunting murmur that gnawed at my sanity. My fingers fumbled to switch on the bedside lamp, but the light did little to dispel the darkness creeping into my mind. Charlie, sensing my distress, whined softly and nudged my hand with his nose. "Stay close, boy," I murmured, trying to draw strength from his presence. I scanned the room again, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The cold, unnatural breeze had dissipated, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I forced myself to move, to check every corner, every crevice. But there was nothing, just the oppressive silence and my racing heart. I decided I needed answers. Grabbing my phone, I dialed the number of my closest friend, Julie. She was a rational thinker, someone who could help me make sense of this. The phone rang a few times before she picked up, her voice groggy with sleep. "Hey, it's late." "What's going on?" she asked, her concern evident. "Julie, something weird is happening here," I whispered, not wanting to wake anyone else in the house. I heard Charlie barking downstairs, but he was next to me the whole time. And now there are these whispers. I don't know what to do. There was a pause before she replied, her tone more alert. "Are you sure it wasn't just a dream? You've been under a lot of stress lately." "I'm sure." The whispers, the cold breeze, a muddy footprint that couldn't have been Charlie's. It all felt so real, I insisted, my voice shaking. Okay. Stay calm. I'm coming over." "Just sit tight and try to stay in the light," Julie said, her voice steadying me somewhat. I thanked her and ended the call, then sank down onto the bed, pulling Charlie close. His warmth was comforting, but my mind kept replaying the events of the night. I glanced at the clock, it was just past 3 a.m. Julie would be here soon, I told myself. Just hold on. Minutes felt like hours as I waited. Every creak of the house, every shift in the shadows, set my nerves on edge. Finally, I heard the sound of a car pulling up and the front door opening. I rushed downstairs to let Julie in, Charlie trotting behind me. Julie stepped inside, her face pale in the dim light of the hallway. "Show me," she said simply. I led her back upstairs, explaining everything again as we walked. When we reached my bedroom, I pointed to the muddy footprint, still stark against the carpet. Julie crouched down, examining it closely. "You're right. This doesn't make any sense," she muttered, standing up and brushing off her hands. "But we need more than a footprint to figure this out. Let's look around." We searched the entire house, top to bottom, but found nothing unusual. No more footprints, no open windows, no signs of anyone else being there. Frustration and fear gnawed at me, but Julie remained calm, determined to find an explanation. As we stood in the living room, debating our next move, the whispering returned. Louder this time, more distinct. Julie's eyes widened as she heard it too, and she grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. "Yes," I breathed, terror gripping me anew. The whispers seemed to be converging, coming from all directions, surrounding us in a suffocating cacophony. I looked at Julie, her face mirroring my fear, and realized that we were no longer alone in the house. The whispers grew louder, their indistinct words swirling around us like a dark mist. Julie and I stood rooted in place, unable to move as the eerie sounds enveloped us. Charlie growled low in his throat, his hackles raised. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, taking on ominous shapes that flickered just out of the corner of our eyes. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the cacophony. "We need to find the source," Julie replied, her eyes scanning the room. "There must be something here, something we're missing." I nodded, trying to muster the courage to move. Together, we began a methodical search of the living room, checking every nook and cranny. The whispers ebbed and flowed, sometimes almost fading away, only to surge back with renewed intensity. It felt as if the house itself was alive, breathing, watching. Suddenly, Charlie bolted towards the fireplace, barking furiously. We rushed over to see what had caught his attention. There, behind a loose brick, was a hidden compartment. My hands trembled as I pried the brick away, revealing a small, dusty box inside. "Open it," Julie urged, her voice tight with anticipation. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a small, ornate key. The photographs were of a family, a man, a woman, and a young boy, all smiling and happy. But the letters told a different story, one of tragedy and loss. The family had lived in this house decades ago, and their son had mysteriously disappeared one night. The grief-stricken parents had spent years searching for him, to no avail. "This must be connected to what's happening," Julie said, her face pale as she read one of the letters. "The whispers, the footprints, it's like they're trying to tell us something." "But what?" I asked, frustration mounting. "What do they want from us?" Just then, the whispers coalesced into a single, chilling voice that filled the room. "Find him," it said, the words dripping with sorrow and desperation. "He's still here." Julie and I exchanged a horrified glance. "The boy," she whispered. "He's still here, somewhere in this house." "But how?" "It's been decades," I replied, my mind struggling to comprehend. "He'd be not alive," Julie finished for me, her eyes wide with realization. "But his spirit, his presence. That's what we're feeling." We stood there, grappling with the enormity of what we had discovered. The whispers had stopped, as if waiting for us to take action. The small key in the box seemed to glow with a faint, otherworldly light, drawing our attention. "It must open something important," I said, picking it up. "But what?" Charlie barked again, this time at the old grandfather clock in the corner of the room. I approached it cautiously, key in hand. There was a small, almost hidden keyhole on the side. My hand shook as I inserted the key and turned it. With a soft click, a panel on the clock slid open, revealing a narrow, dark staircase descending into the basement. The air that wafted up was musty and cold, sending a shiver down my spine. The whispers returned, now seeming to guide us, urging us down the steps. "We have to go down there," Julie said, her voice trembling but resolute. "We have to find him." I nodded, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. Together, we descended the stairs, each step taking us deeper into the unknown. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if urging us to hurry. At the bottom of the stairs, we found ourselves in a small, dimly lit room. In the center was an old, wooden chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. The whispers crescendoed, filling the room with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. "This is it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "This is where he is." The small, dimly lit room at the bottom of the stairs was thick with an air of anticipation and dread. The whispers swirled around us, a cacophony of urgent voices urging us forward. Julie and I exchanged a glance, both of us knowing that whatever lay inside the wooden chest would finally reveal the truth. My hands shook as I approached the chest, dust and cobwebs clinging to it like the secrets of the past. "Ready?" Julie asked, her voice trembling but determined. "Ready," I replied, though my heart pounded with fear. I knelt and grasped the old, rusted lock. With a deep breath, I inserted the ornate key and turned it. The lock clicked open, and the lid creaked as I lifted it, revealing the contents within. Inside the chest were more photographs, a small journal, and a tiny, worn-out toy. But what caught our attention most was a skeletal hand, bound and tied with thick, heavy chains. The sight of it made my stomach churn, and I felt an icy chill run down my spine. Julie gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's him." The whispers intensified, a mournful wail that echoed through the room. It felt as though the very walls were crying out, begging for release. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the skeletal hand, feeling the cold, unyielding bones beneath my touch. "We have to free him," I said, my voice barely audible over the din of the whispers. "This is what he's been waiting for." Together, Julie and I worked to remove the chains, each link heavy with the weight of decades of sorrow and suffering. As the last chain fell away, the whispers ceased abruptly, replaced by a profound silence that seemed to echo with the finality of our actions. Suddenly, the room grew colder, the air thickening with an otherworldly presence. The skeletal hand moved, and a ghostly figure began to materialize before us. It was the boy from the photographs, his translucent form shimmering with an ethereal light. His eyes, once filled with fear and pain, now looked at us with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice echoing softly in the silence. "I've been trapped here for so long. Thank you for freeing me." Tears welled up in my eyes as I watched him, my heart aching for the years of torment he had endured. "We're so sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "We didn't know." The boy smiled, a serene, almost peaceful expression. "It's not your fault. I can finally rest now." With those words, his form began to fade, dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. The room brightened, the oppressive darkness lifting as his spirit found peace at last. Julie and I stood there, overwhelmed by what we had just witnessed. The house, once filled with whispers and shadows, now felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. We knew that the boy's spirit was finally at rest, free from the chains that had bound him for so long. As we made our way back upstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had not only freed the boy but also healed a wound in the house itself. Charlie trotted beside us, his tail wagging as if sensing the change. Just as we reached the top of the stairs, a sudden, deafening crash echoed from behind us. We spun around to see the grandfather clock splintering into pieces, the walls trembling violently. A cold, malevolent presence filled the air, much stronger and darker than before. The whispers returned, no longer mournful but furious, vengeful. "This isn't over," Julie said, her voice barely audible over the roar. "We've only just begun to uncover the truth." The end. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.